that because there were so many nerves and muscles that were destroyed by the initial polio virus, as one ages, there is sort of a rapid rate of aging that goes on. And so there's a breakdown of muscles and nerves. So my lip returned, I had chronic pain, I had fatigue, I was depressed, I had no idea what was wrong with me. I had symptoms for about 10 years of worsening pain, fatigue kept getting worse and worse. Finally, I decided I needed help, and I went to Spalding Rehab Hospital, and I was diagnosed with post-polio syndrome. They told me that I would probably be in a wheelchair and that I needed to adapt my cape house because I had upstairs and downstairs. And so my husband Tom and I, we started planning for this future. It really didn't look so hot. But what happened was I decided that they had told me that I should leave my full-time job at the VA. I was just 3 years shy of retirement. And I kept saying, but just let me get to retirement. And they said, well, we can, but it's really counteracting what you're doing in rehab. If you want to preserve your functioning, you really should quit your job. So what I did was I quit my job, I took a leap of faith, and I discovered I started writing poetry. And when I had polio, my physical therapist was fabulous. And she read Dr. Seuss to me before every painful physical therapy session. So this cadence was kind of in my soul. And what happened was I started writing poetry. The first poem that I wrote, now mind you, I was in a leg brace. I was using a wheelchair at times for mobility. I was in a wrist splint. I looked like I'd been in a car crash, really. I had a short leg brace. At times I used a cane. I was going for trigger injections in my cervical spine. I was going through intensive outpatient rehab. I wrote this poem called Running the Race. And I was talking all about, for the first time, what it was like to be a polio survivor. I was just beginning to connect to my body. For the first time in my life, I said, you know what? This is the body I got. I better love it because it's what I have. And so I started writing poetry, and I started visualizing myself running, winning a 10K race. I started harnessing the power of my imagination to heal my life. Quitting my full-time job relieved the stress. I was able to sleep in. This poetry started pouring out of me. It was all about love, joy, gratitude, freedom in my body. I started having dreams about dancing in the rain and being without my leg brace. And little by little, with the rehab, I started getting stronger. I went back to rehab. They were delighted with my progress, but they said to me, if you use it, you'll lose it. So be careful. And this kind of went counter to what I was feeling because my body felt like it wanted to do something more. So I kind of went against medical advice and I hired a personal trainer. And the first thing I said to her was, do you think there's anything we can do to get me stronger? I had difficulty getting off a low toilet seat. My tremors were still really bad. I was terribly deconditioned. And she said, sure, whether you think you can or you think you can't, quoting Henry Ford, you're right. And so we embarked on this journey together. That was in October of 2007. In February of 2008, I started doing weight training. And I was able to get a little stronger. I was able to get off a low toilet seat, which was a big accomplishment. I was able to get up and down the stairs in my house, which was very exciting. We realized we weren't going to have to adapt the house after all. And in February of 2008, Janine, my personal trainer, says, you're doing really well. Also, when she first did my assessment, my cardio assessment, if you've ever had a personal trainer, you do the step test, I couldn't even do it. I couldn't even do a push-up. So in February of 2008, I'd met these milestones of being able to pass my first really fitness assessment. And that was very exciting for me. So she said, well, this is great. What do you want to do now? I said, well, I've never felt really free in my body to walk outside. Before I had polio, I was a dancer. And I said, I'd love to be able to dance again. I said, I want to kind of mix up my fitness routine and whatnot. And the next thing that I said bypassed my brain. It came right from my gut. And I said, and I want to run the Boston Marathon for Spalding Rehab Hospital. And she said, totally nonplussed, okay, you need a pair of running shoes because I'm still in my polio shoes with my toe-up brace. So I went over to Marathon Sports, and I said, they said, well, what are you in now? Which is the first thing they always ask you, right? I said, I'm in polio shoes. And actually, my daughter had an old pair of running shoes that I put on to go into the store. So they were wonderful, and they took a lot of time with me to check out what my gait was and everything. And I got on the treadmill. I'd never run on a treadmill before. And I just went slowly, and they watched my gait, and I was fitted with my first pair of running shoes. And this was in February of 2008. And so I told my husband and my daughter that I have this wonderful plan. Guess what I'm going to do? Guess what my next goal is with Janine? And they said, oh, what? What are you going to do? And I said, we're going to run. I said, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. And they said to me,
and we said, right.
And so Tom said, yeah, okay, well, you're not going to do it alone. I'm going to be out there with you. And my daughter, who was a couch potato, she self-proclaimed, I'm not talking out of school, she said, oh, I've always wanted to run Boston. This is cool. Well, if we had any idea what goes into training for a marathon, I'm sure, you know, we never would have done this. But we had made the commitment. And so starting in February of 2008, starting indoors, starting to build up my cardio, starting to do the steps and everything, she consulted with my husband and my daughter, and we formed Team McManus. And I also knew that we were going to have a fundraising goal. So I'd never fundraised before in my life, and I'd never run a marathon before in my life. And just out of curiosity, how many of you are Virgin Marathoners getting ready for Monday? One? Who else? Who else is?
In the hallway.
All right. Well, I felt the way you're feeling right now 2 years ago, not knowing what was this experience going to be like. So we went through, we started indoors, and then I started outdoors, and first I ran 30 seconds, and my heart rate went up to 165. I will never forget that. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Well, little by little, 30 seconds turned into 30 minutes, and I remember that day so clearly when I ran 30 minutes continuously. It was incredible. And then we started on hills, and then I started getting out in road races, which was totally new for me. In gym class, I was always called easy out, and I was always teased. And, you know, everybody moved into the infield. It's like, oh, here she comes, easy out. And out on the roads, I was always finishing last in the road races. And what I discovered was in this journey is that it's true that the last shall be first, because people knew I was out there and I was running from my heart. And I was running with such strength and such courage to overcome all the symptoms of post-polio syndrome to be out on the roads. And when I would finish last, people would really cheer. And it was absolutely exhilarating. And this is to speak to the fact that it doesn't matter what your time is. It's the fact that you're out there and you're doing something that only, what is it, Rick, 1%?
1/2 of 1% of the population on the planet.
1/2 of 1% of the population on the planet.
Bill Rogers said that.
Oh, thank you. I'll quote you though. Ever do. So we trained through, it was a winter almost as bad as this year, and one of the symptoms of post-polio syndrome is cold intolerance. So I had to really harness the power of my mind, and when they say that Boston is 95% mental and 5% physical, it's the God's honest truth, because it was totally, totally mental preparation that got me through this. And when I was out there in those freezing cold, bitter days, I would imagine my body having this warm lava just flowing through it. And thank God for Marathon Sports, because they outfitted us with all the layers and everything that we needed. And so we'd be out there and we'd be going around Jamaica Pond. When the wind chill got dangerous, we moved indoors. And I think, what was the most, Tom, 117 times around the BU track? to get the miles in our legs because I didn't feel safe running on a treadmill. And so we got very creative during our training, and it became a very joyous journey. Alongside it, we were doing our fundraising, and of course, people were really drawn to my story, which was very touching. So there we were on April 20th, 2009. We took our start at 9 a.m. with the mobility impaired runners, and 7 hours and 49 minutes later, we crossed the finish line of the 113th Boston Marathon.